Hello, and welcome to this episode of Let's Talk Careers. I'm Claudia Malad, and on today's episode, we have Christine Costa. Listen in as we follow her from British Columbia to Ontario, transitioning from being a high school teacher to running her own consulting business. And we also discuss the importance of lifelong learning. I hope you enjoy. Hi, Christine. Welcome to this episode of Let's Talk Careers.
Hi, Claudia. Thanks
Nice
for having me.
Yes, and nice to meet you.
Yes, you too.
So welcome to the episode, and we're going to just talk about your career journey, your career path, and we'll, ask questions along the way. So my first question for you is, or not really question, but thing, can you please introduce yourself for the audience and something you're passionate about?
Yes. So my name is Christine Costa. I'm currently an entrepreneur. I will describe that, I'm sure, in more detail as we go along. But I've had a career in human resources. I love to sing.
Oh,
I
nice.
love being in nature and passionate. Yeah, I'd say, music, anything music related, really passionate about.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. So let's talk a little bit about your early stages of your career.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what your first job was ever?
Oh, first job was being a hostess slash bus girl. I don't even know what you call it now,
Okay.
but working in a restaurant, cleaning dishes, just doing whatever I needed to do.
Right.
So that was just in high school, and I didn't love doing that, but did it, paid a little extra money.
Yeah.
And then I also tutored as well. I didn't really count that as a job, but
Okay.
tutoring was a job too in high school. Yeah.
Okay. That's awesome. All right. So let's talk more about your career journey now. So from your high school part-time gig to where you are to now, fill in the gaps for me. What have you done since then?
Yeah. So after graduation, entered into university, I attended UBC, so back in Vancouver, did a Bachelor of Science in biochemistry. Originally had sights of going into medicine or something of that nature. And a lot of exploration during that time of what I really wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I did notice, I ended up being a residence don in, I guess what you call it, a residence advisor, we called it, in university residence. And I loved that job. I started to really realize, I love organizing things. I love working with people. There was just something about that. And I didn't really clue into it at the time. But after doing my Bachelor of Science, it was kind of a what's next.
Right.
And my dad actually had pointed out, he's like, why don't you do, the Bachelor of Education at that point through UBC was another 12-month program for post-secondary teaching. And he had just mentioned, he's like, I always thought I knew that you like to teach, and just, I would kind of teach myself. Back in high school, I would just kind of read through things and present them to an empty room or to my stuffed animals, just like I was just learning, the material myself. So I would, talk it through. Anyway, so then I ended up doing that 12-month program. It was 18 months or 12 months, regardless.
Mm-hmm.
So doing a Bachelor of Education, and then I taught high school for a few years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So math, chemistry, physics, even I think I got a class of. And so really enjoyed that. But I always knew something more, something else, because I didn't necessarily see myself doing that forever. And then I just really explored. I thought about education, thought about what could I do to upskill and just help myself maybe transition into a different career, similar but different career, and ended up coming to Ontario to do my Master's of Business Administration at McMaster. And that was a co-op program, which, I thought was really advantageous to get some private sector experience and just true business experience. I thought it was very different, obviously, from coming from teaching and having been in school for so long. So that was a really great opportunity. And then with my past experiences and what I was passionate about, started to realize that human resources was kind of an area that was going to be my preference. And just with that learning and development background and whatnot. So through that ended up landing a job then at Bank of Montreal. And I was there for over 11 years and had a variety of human resources jobs. So worked with amazing people. That's where I started to really realize when you work with really great people, it makes such a difference. And I would tell you that, I chose that job just, mainly because of that, for the people and the experiences. Yeah. And so, yeah, worked with that for many years, different roles, ended up leaving the bank, just because for a variety of reasons, but one of them, I wanted to experience a different industry, different job, and worked with an HR, talent management company. So now kind of going more tech, but I kind of liked that role of being able to be kind of an interpreter between the technical resources and then understanding the HR speak and kind of being that person in between. That job also enabled me to work remotely early on before remote work was, a big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And lots of conference calls, video calls weren't really, a big thing. Yeah. So I had clients across the, mainly in the States, a few in Canada. I was one of the only Canadian consultants at that company. It was called People Fluent. But it got a little bit of business travel. So got to experience a bit of that, visit some interesting places in Texas and California. Anyway, did that for a few years and then started to think of, the world started to change too. And I just thought maybe something closer to home, what would get me closer to eventually owning my own business? Because that was always very early on and a kind of an aspiration of mine. And found a really amazing job at McMaster University in human resources, and in a way being able to act as an internal consultant. So I was able to really kind of test the waters if, that was something I really wanted to do within human resources, again, with an amazing group of people, amazing team, and specifically an area called organizational development. So I was working with, so many different teams, individuals across the university, doing what I do now. And that really laid the groundwork and ability for me to go out on my own. Then the pandemic happened, and
of course,
and that presented lots of opportunities and lots of learnings for sure. And so within the last year, it was almost a year ago, June, started my own business called Christine Connects, and I call myself a professional training and learning service, doing HR consulting as well. But I just get to do a little bit of everything and lots of different things. And I teach at Conestoga. I feel like I'm rambling on, but there's so many different things. But maybe I'll stop there and you can.
Super impressive career. So love to hear all the stories about that. But it sounds like you've kind of found your niche. And along the way, you were doing a lot of teaching and training and discovery. So I think it's great that you've kind of landed on your feet doing your own thing, also while still teaching and training as well. You mentioned when you were talking about your undergraduate degree, after you graduated, you were kind of unsure of what was next.
Yeah.
What would you say to yourself? How was that experience when you were going through it? Do you remember?
Yeah, I think at the time I would say to myself, seek out some resources. I mean, I know now in being part of the university environment and the college environment, there's so many student resources, probably many more now than maybe when I went to university, but I would have talked to someone more and had more of those conversations because now reflecting, I realized those moments, like I said, bringing up that example of working in residence and organizing things, I could tell there were these glimmers of things I really like to do, but I didn't really know what that could be or what that could lead to.
Right.
So, being able to have a more formal career conversation or just, again, talking to different people, what are the options, right? Yeah. As opposed to, obviously my dad, filled that void a little bit and provided me some career coaching. Yeah. But being able to seek out some resources, I think would have been helpful.
Because so many students are in that position, myself included. When I graduated university, no idea what I wanted to do. So it's good to hear that, we now know what we need to do, but we didn't do it then.
Well, and it seems so binary at the time, right? It was like arts, sciences,
that's it.
Profession, but there's a vast amount of of opportunities. And these days, there's so many stats about how many more jobs that we don't even imagine that will be available in a year, 2 years, 5 years. So
absolutely. And you also mentioned as part of your master's program, you had a co-op experience.
Yes.
And co-op is something that is near and dear to my heart. I've worked in co-op for 8 years. So what I want to ask you about that, how was that experience and how valuable was that experiential learning opportunity for you?
Oh, so much so. Just from the aspect of competing to get the job, right? In a pretty safe environment. Most people end up, most students end up, finding a placement. And the staff worked so tirelessly to help us get to that point. And then be able to have that short-term experience, 4 months. It's not a huge risk or a huge commitment. But the employers that worked with us were, again, looking back, gave us really great opportunities. I got to, run a committee and,
Nice.
and of course, yes, you're doing other things. So back then, maybe it was some photocopying or like whatever tasks there might be, but being able to just be, have that opportunity to, have a perspective of in a big company. I was able to work at Ford headquarters. One of them was at Bank of Montreal, which then led me, and then at Hay Management Consultants. They're an HR consulting firm. So just to have that, bird's eye view, and just peek into what the world is in different industries was a really great opportunity.
That's awesome. Can you tell me what was one of the pivotal moments of your career? So I know you have kind of a lot of things going on at the same time, but what would be a pivotal moment for you? Was it, transitioning from, being an employee to being a consultant, now self-employed? Tell me more about your pivotal moment.
Pivotal moments. One of the pivotal moments was leaving teaching, leaving the high school teaching, because for a lot of my friends, the 25 years plus years, they are still, teachers, which is amazing. Have an amazing career. So being able to take that risk, it felt really risky at the time. And I had people that would say, like, what are you doing? Why are you leaving this great job and moving across the country? And I really didn't have much. I drove across in my car and just, it was a big thing at the time. It was, and so I think that was pivotal, for me to take a chance on myself, take a chance on meeting brand new people, it was a little bit of a excitement too, to kind of start something new, start fresh, just see what the opportunity was. I knew then that I could fall back too, right? I knew that I had certain skills and abilities to be able to fall back if I needed to too. But I think that was a pivotal experience.
It's big too, because you said you moved from BC to Ontario.
Yeah.
Is your family still in BC?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how was that transition, moving from British Columbia to Ontario?
It was rocky at times,
Of
right?
course.
There was some, calls home and crying,
Of course.
I'm sure. But I was fortunate and I knew, again, living in residence in my undergrad, how important that experience is. So I got into the graduate residence at MAC for that first term. And I met one of my, best friends in residence, right? And had such a great experience. There was at least, I can't even remember, there was 20 plus of us that were on that same floor, and just the experiences we had there. Yeah. Not that it's more, more important than the learning that I had in the classroom, but
it's just as valuable. I think they're both about the same, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Having a good network of friends and resources, and then of course getting the valuable education as well. But smart move to move into residence, just having a network and people to be around you.
I always will promote, living in residence for sure. Yeah,
that's awesome. You've taken a lot of risks over the course of your career, moving from BC to Ontario. What has taking risks taught you about just in general your career?
Yeah. I would say opportunity, just an opportunity to, test my strengths, an opportunity to see what else is out there. I would call myself a calculated risk taker. Okay. Because I definitely have the confidence in the skills that I bring and what I'm bringing forward. But I know that I can fall back on something, not even fall back, but, if this doesn't work, there's this, and this, right? There's rarely a case, probably for many people, that there's nothing to fall back on. But, being able to have that confidence, be able to see that bigger picture. And then it just opens doors, to relationships, to people that I never thought I would meet. I couldn't imagine a life without it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it sounds to me like you have a plan A, B, C, and D.
Yeah.
And what would you say to someone who's maybe risk adverse? So someone who's terrified of taking risks, but they should still try it anyway. Any advice?
Yeah. Some of it is what's the worst that can happen? Yeah. Right. There's a lot of bests that can happen, but for some people, that stability is key. So it's knowing yourself too. Right. And if stability is more important, and at certain times of life, 100%.
That's what
I've talked to people that they wish they could do this, that, or the other thing, but at this time in life, and be okay with that, right? And know in the right time to do it. There was opportunities presented to me many times, or, where I could have jumped in and bought into a franchise because I was sort of thinking about, running my own business. Looking back, that probably wouldn't have been the best idea. It's fine. But I at least explored enough where you kind of start to push yourself and think, oh, is this really going to happen? Could I do this? Then you'll know, right?
Yeah.
You'll kind of, but you'll never know unless you try, right?
That's it.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about mentorship. So what are your thoughts on mentorship? Have you been a mentor? Tell me your thoughts on mentorship.
Yeah, both, all the above. I've even taught workshops on mentorship to tell people how important it is. And So, over my career, I've had informal relationships, more on the informal side, a few formal ones at the bank for sure that I was a part of. But it's huge just to have someone that you can learn from, talk to, ask questions, what might seem silly questions, but for me, I just like to brainstorm ideas. For me, the art of possibility, like what can I do? Right. I had one, and have one, I consider a really great friend, but also a mentor. And she, when she changed careers, she working at an outplacement agency. Anyway, so working with people that are kind of ending a certain point of their career. And I learned a lot just from her stories from that and what, kind of what you want to do and what you want to do a bit differently. But, being able to have really great conversations with individuals that, have a lot of learnings from their experiences.
And then any advice for our viewers on how to secure a mentor? Yeah. Like it's not that easy, but what are your thoughts?
No, I mean, a lot of it just comes from some friendships, right? Maybe it's a past manager, right? I've mentored individuals that really just reached out and asked if they could, meet me for coffee, and we met a few times. It doesn't have to be a really long commitment either, right? Mm-hmm. You might just get value in understanding a bit more of that person's path, right? Kind of what we're doing today, right? Yeah. But in a more intimate setting. Yeah. But, I would say take an interest in someone, reach out, just to start to develop a little bit of a relationship, and then ask, right? Yeah. Just ask, start with something small. Is it just, maybe a quick Zoom call or a coffee, a tea
Low
or something?
Stakes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Get to know, to see if there is a connection there too, because that's a big part of it. Huge. There's a lot of programs that don't end up being successful because people kind of force fit into these relationships, and there isn't really, a connection.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So let's switch gears a bit. Yeah. Now let's talk about your business. Yeah. Super exciting. Almost at the 1-year anniversary. Tell me all about your consulting company.
Yes. So Christine Connects. I'm all about making connections for others, for themselves, within their teams, and then their environment. So it sounds really broad, but I love working with individuals or teams around self-awareness, just learning new things, how they can connect with each other, a lot of group dynamics and group collaboration work, coaching individuals. So I find it's a real, like I mentioned with that, my last position with McMaster, just an extension of what I was doing. Yeah. So some of it is a little bit of teaching and facilitating and working with individuals, what they need. Maybe it's a team retreat, where they need to have a little bit of fun and kind of de-stress and collaborate and understand each other from a work perspective. Right?
Okay. So organizations, just so I understand, organizations will contact you if there is a need, some kind of HR type need, right? Yeah. And then you kind of do your analysis, meet with the company, and figure out what they best need. Yeah.
Or if it's just, hey, we would love to have a lunch and learn with our employees on a particular topic, I'll come in, and either it's certain topics that I've already gave workshops on, or I, am always open to developing content too.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's super exciting.
Yeah.
That's great. So how did you come up with the idea for your business?
Yes, for Christine Connects. Really, I think of it as an extension of what I was already doing. So it was an opportunity for me to do what I just love to do selfishly. Yeah. But I saw it as there is an opportunity. And we talked about, people can learn in so many ways, online, virtually. And there is an industry of learning professionals. So, I saw myself as being part of that. Yeah. So being able to extend what I was doing, but being able to have autonomy and do it for myself and be able to reach many different
Right,
organizations in
right.
doing that.
How did you know it was time to make the switch?
Time to make the switch. I mean, a lot of self-reflection. There was just, the opportunity just presented itself. There was a lot of changes happening within my current work environment
Okay.
that, led me to, do some internal soul searching
Yeah.
as well. And then realizing, hey, maybe this is the time,
Yeah.
right? It sounds easy, but, but it is a lot of that kind of soul searching and reflection, especially coming out of the pandemic too.
Yeah.
And then kind of, seeing a little bit of the light, after that, I thought, okay, here's an opportunity to, take a chance and see what happens. Yeah.
That's awesome. How would you say you manage work and life? So work-life balance, because you got a lot on the go.
Yeah. Yeah. Always lots on the go. It's important to have some balance. I mean, yeah. And even I've done that in my own work is, there's so much around work-life balance, work-life harmony. What does that look like?
Yeah.
I'm fortunate now to have kind of a world where some of it is work, but it's play to me.
Okay.
So I'm fortunate to be in that, position where I could say that, but, just having a lot of, having those outside passions, right? So yes, if you have that job and it's a 9 to 5 or whatever it might look like, what are those things that bring you joy outside of that? It might be your family, might be relationships, might be, whatever goals. It might be my music has been that for me. My family's been that for me. But, just being able to make sure I have, definitely goals at work, but, goals and things to aspire to with my personal life.
Of work.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's super important. So getting that fit of other things besides just
exactly.
work.
Yeah.
For sure. So you mentioned your passion for music.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that? How does music impact you on a daily? What do you do for music? Do you sing? Tell us more.
Yeah. So music is, I just always picture there's a soundtrack, to my life. Always have listening to music, but I love singing.
Okay.
And kind of a fun fact, a number of years ago, I got involved in a karaoke competition, which then I ended up winning our Canadian nationals and going to representing Canada and Finland for the World Karaoke Championships.
Amazing. What do you sing? Like what type of music? What genre?
All kinds, like pop, pop, adult contemporary.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I can belt out a Celine Dion, and all that. Adele, whatever.
Beautiful.
All the things. Yeah.
Okay.
All the things. It's just a way to, I find it's just an amazing way to express myself.
Yeah.
It's good for, releasing stress.
Yeah.
And then, I bring up the karaoke because, and we talked about that, having those, passion projects as part of your work life. But that just opened up, a whole other group of individuals and connections. And then, it was an opportunity for me to just learn about myself and put myself out there.
Okay.
Right? A lot of what I do, kind of teaching and facilitating, I find that there's mirrors to putting yourself out there, being on a stage and singing a power ballad.
Yeah.
There's a lot of connections there. But being able to have that confidence and build on a certain skill and want to develop and be better. Yeah. I just love to do it. Yeah. Yeah.
That's super exciting. Wow. Congratulations for winning
thanks,
that.
Thanks.
That's amazing. And then the other piece I wanted to chat about was the piece about, yes, you are an entrepreneur. You know what this means. You own your own company, but what does this mean on a daily basis? Like on the day-to-day, being the owner of Christine Connects. What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, you play all roles, right? So I'm my own manager, right? To be able to figure out, okay, what am I doing today? What am I doing for the next week, next month? Like kind of planning out what my schedule is, how I use my time. And then I'm my own marketing person. I could probably keep working on the social media strategy, but whatever that marketing looks like, if it's networking and emailing people or letting people know about what offerings, I'm currently involved with. I'm fortunate to work with some institutions that then market for me.
That's
but
nice.
anyway, there's all that. I'm my own finance person. So sometimes and I don't mind, I like it, writing up my own invoices and getting those sent out and make sure that, the bills get paid
Of course.
right. All of those aspects. Anyway, I could list many of the other jobs, but, some of it, what I love to do, then it gives me that time to work on presentations, prepare for workshops,
Right.
All of that. So then I able to do the work that I really love to do. And then, I'm out delivering, tomorrow I'm at McMaster, having a coaching session with an individual, and then in the afternoon giving a workshop on emotional intelligence. So, then my days are kind of out and about, or else they're at my computer. And, I'd say I'm my own tech person, but at home I have someone I can leverage for that too. But making sure I'm all set up to deliver virtually as well. I've got a workshop on burnout next week that I'm delivering. Nice. It's a full day workshop, and, teaching virtually has its own considerations too. I want to keep things alive and keep things energetic and interesting for those individuals that will be attending that. So in some ways it's preparing for performances, right?
This is true. This is true.
And I'm cognizant of like the energy that I bring, the knowledge that I bring to what I'm doing, and really caring and ensuring that it's a great learning opportunity for whoever's attending.
Yeah. I love that. That's awesome. All right. So can you tell me, I guess, almost a year at your 1 year anniversary, what is your, I guess, biggest success to this point with your business?
Oh, that's a good question. I think just the fact that I made that leap, just having launched it and success, like being busy, busy enough, again, I've made different partnerships and working with different groups. Just really, humbled by the reception and by, by the individuals that have, reached out for support. But and then I just look for, I know that there's so many more things to do, could do, and opportunity, but I just look forward to kind of creating that and paving my own road, I guess.
Yeah. And I think all of your experiences kind of help build and shape that. And I think
100%.
maybe who you are is a testament to the fact that you're busy and you have clients right away. So you've kind of set up a good network, whether you know it or not.
Exactly.
Before you kind of made that big launch.
No, exactly. And like I said, it's all kind of calculated. You have, now having so many friends that are in the industry, so many connections. Yeah, it definitely helps as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How do you make career decisions? So, there's other people in our lives that always influence what we do, how we do it, but how do you make your career decisions?
Yeah, a lot of self-exploration. Like usually someone will hear like, oh, I'm leaving to do this, like start my business. And it seems like a shock for people I haven't talked to in a while, but there's a lot that goes on behind it for me. Some of it is just journaling. Like I have ideas, and some of it's just journaling that and looking at pros and cons and opportunities and, a bit of that business research, right? What strengths do I bring? So it's a bit of self-discovery and then a little bit of research and analysis to see what the opportunity is and see if it's something worth pursuing. So there's that. And then especially in launching out on my own, I just talked to people that had done it before. And I had, probably a pretty big list of individuals that, were fortunate again to be dear friends or individuals that I kind of just reached out to that I'd only worked with once or twice, just to get a variety of opinions and thoughts and experiences of what they did. You're not necessarily always going to follow that same path, but you're going to gain an insight, from what someone else has done before, or just again to see what's possible.
Well, yeah, because you just never know, right?
Well, that's the thing, right? And someone will, provide a piece of advice or say, okay, these are things I wish I'd known, when I did start, my own business, or what it might be. Some of it might be really practical about invoicing and anyway, all of those different things, but you gather that along the way. So yeah, a lot of kind of information kind of gathering and soul searching, and then, talking to my partner and really getting some good advice then with the people that are closest to me that know me really well.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it'll have an impact on them too, right?
Oh, exactly.
So that's it. If it doesn't go well, yikes. If it does, great. But you just never know.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? You absolutely never know.
Yeah.
So we're going to switch gears a little bit now. I want to talk about technology. And of course, artificial intelligence is everywhere. So how has artificial intelligence affected you, your business in particular?
Yeah. And so I mentioned too, I have my business and then I do teach through Costa and McMaster continuing education. And there's been a lot there, right? Just around academic integrity and seeing how students use it. I myself am also a student because I'm taking some psychology courses through Toronto Metropolitan University because, why not?
Yeah.
But no, I love it. But I love being a student at this point. So there's that part of it just in terms of, writing papers and seeking answers to, to tests and things. But as an entrepreneur, I kind of use it, when I'm working on my own and I just need that, you'd have that partner to kind of brainstorm with you. I just pull up like ChatGPT and just ask questions, right? Like, or, maybe it's some ideas of titles for a paper, or something, or different examples for things. So I kind of use it as that brainstorming a partner for me. But it's helpful. It's been really helpful. Yeah.
I think you have to get really good at the prompts.
Exactly.
That's what it is more than anything else.
Exactly. And you're still taking that information, validating it against, whatever knowledge base you're working with and making sure it's accurate information. But again, just to give you ideas or, give you, kind of a path, it's definitely better than your regular Google search, right?
Yes. And what trends would you say are impacting your industry right now?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is just around overwhelm, well-being, right?
Yeah.
A lot of what so many different people, but especially from a workplace perspective, understanding how to manage workloads, leaders trying to, manage everything, the complexities of everything coming at them. And then managing teams, and then it's teams, it's people, right? It's people. It's not easy.
Unpredictable.
We all like psychology, like all that. Yeah. That we all carry so much, but how to make sense of that for people. And especially coming out of the last few years, right? Where, values too are changing, people's perspective of what work is. I find it's a really exciting time because why does it have to be 9 to 5?
Yeah.
Why does it have to be a desk job? Yeah. Especially for knowledge workers. And let me add that caveat, but what does work look like? What can it work, look like, and just challenge some of that too.
That's cool. And then the other piece I wanted to ask about was organizational fit. Like, what does organizational fit mean to you? Whether it's you being a business owner, you being a student, or even you being an instructor here at the college.
Organizational fit really means a connection to values to me. A lot of individuals kind of think that you're looking for the same kind of person or ideal version of someone, because I've been involved with, lots of recruiting for positions. But at the end of the day, when you really distill it, I mean, we want different ideas, different backgrounds, different people, different cultures, right? It's about values, though, at the end of the day, right? It's an integrity. It's about what that company or institution or organization stands for, how they work, the work ethic, all of that, right? And that's something that I've tried to be much more clear about later in my career, but probably one of those things that you might say, like, what would you wish? I would have gotten clear about that for myself, like truly earlier to be able to articulate that. But yeah, that for me, like making sure it's a model that fits to my values. And then I'm working with, companies, individuals that, I see that there's a fit as well.
Okay. That's perfect.
Yeah.
And what would you say are some current projects that you're working on right now?
Yeah. So I've got a collaboration of a project with 2 other ladies where we've launched a series of kind of group coaching workshops for academic leaders. Okay. So it could be, at the college, university level, aspiring leaders, both on the academic side and then also on the staff or administrative side. So offering 5 sessions that we can work with those leaders and talk about, timely topics for them and provide them support. So we launched a pilot in the winter, and now we're offering more sessions coming up in May and into the fall. So yeah, kind of a fun project to be working on. What else? And then just, I think eventually I'd like to get to a point where I'm offering kind of some set workshops that even Christine Connects offers as herself, not necessarily through other institutions that, because learning is just so accessible these days, right? And so much different. And this is one of the reasons too. I thought it was a great opportunity to go out on my own, because there's so much more learning online, virtually, than had been before, right? So it really kind of opens the floodgates just to accessible learning, and just the reach that you have is so much more,
broader,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and there are things like LinkedIn Learning and, other things, but, there's still, I think, some opportunities there as well to get out to people and provide free learning as well. But anyway, yeah. So hopefully I'll have my own kind of projects too in the future.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier as well that you're taking psychology courses right now at TMU. What was the motivation behind that?
Yeah. So all these great ideas I have, part of me has always wanted to also just research, right? And again, it's just more of an interest in the field. I follow Dr. Adam Grant not religiously, but I follow him. Yeah, he's an organizational psychologist. And I just love that kind of melding and looking at the psychology behind work itself and the people at work and how we behave at work and what that all means, and connecting that to our personal lives as well. So I thought, I want to get some more formal education myself and just see, what research is out there. How is the field evolving? So it's been great to just put myself back to being a student, more like academically outside of, I've taken many certifications and workshops and things along the years. Write my own papers and take my own final exams, which I just did this week. And see if that was, and it was they've got a great program, to be able to do a certificate to see if that's something I want to then pursue a master's or PhD for myself, right? Kind of dip into it a little bit, see, okay, is this something I do want to continue with? And for now, yes.
For now,
definitely yes.
I'm a psychology major, so I agree.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. Oh, and I think I just appreciate it so much more and differently, having had a career, having lived, just a life and experience, and it just sits a bit differently. Yeah. Which is amazing to look at it from that lens now too. Yeah.
The power of networking, super important.
Yes.
You kind of mentioned it a bit earlier when you talked about your move to residence.
Yeah.
Tell me, how do you use networking in your business, in your industry? How do you leverage networking?
Yeah. Some of it's just having any conversations. It doesn't have to be that hard. I've definitely been in business school and had those presentations of, make sure every time you go into a room to, talk to 3 people. I do think of that because I am, as extroverted as I seem to, I have some of those introverted tendencies too.
Okay.
And sometimes I do go to those big events and kind of feel like, I don't really want to talk to people. What am I going to say? I don't really love making small talk. But, if you kind of just, make it a bit simpler and take the opportunity at least, right, to make a connection. LinkedIn is powerful, right, to have all those individuals. And, sometimes I'm not afraid to, just send somebody a message or see if there is something there to just connect with people. But I think I just naturally, do connect with people, but, having some reminders sometimes of just connecting in with individuals that you haven't seen in a while, and just kind of look at it as a friendship, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So my signature question, my final question for you is, what advice do you have for students? So just in general, after you graduate, and like you mentioned, you didn't know what you wanted to do, but just generally, what advice would you give for students?
I might say 2 things. So, one is to just take time to self-reflect, like truly what, it's so easy to get caught up on what you should do or a certain ladder or a certain path.
Yep.
When people always talk about what's the career path I could take, I always kind of cringe at that because I feel like that narrows down your focus.
And it's never a path.
It's never a path. Yeah, I think that's the big thing, right?
Yeah.
But it's just to be open to different possibilities, but also do that self-reflection. Like, what do you truly enjoy? What are kind of your table stakes, right? What are you looking for in a job? Don't think of the job specifically, but the kinds of things you like to work with people. No, you like to work independently. Like, discover that about yourself.
Yeah.
And again, so that becomes your kind of benchmark to what you're looking for. And then the other one, yeah, definitely being open. And then I think I was going to say something else, but maybe I'll just leave it at that.
All right. Thank you so much, Christine, for coming in today.
Thank you so much, Claudia.
Awesome. What an inspiring conversation. Thank you for listening to this episode of Let's Talk Careers. If you like this episode and want to hear more, follow us on Spotify and subscribe to us on YouTube. See you in the next one.